On top of everything else, we do acrobatics here on the platform. Thank you for that amazing song. Let's give them another hand. You know, over and over, I have this experience with Narian and Janet where the song that they create or bring right before the message is so much more perfect than I could ever even imagine. And there's one of those moments of knowing that there is so much more going on here than meets the eye, right? That there is a power and a presence. There is a divine intelligence that orchestrates what happens here in this community far beyond anything that we could sit down and plan out. It's just amazes me. And it's one of those moments of awakening to oneness. That's what we've been focusing on all year, that process of awakening. Because that oneness is never missing. The oneness is always the truth of who we are and the truth of what is. There is always one power and one presence, and wherever we are, that power and presence is. So it is not ours to create it. It is ours to awaken to it. And turning the light on is perfect, right? When someone turns the light on, all of a sudden we see and we know that which we might have forgotten. Today I want to talk about the oh wow of that. I don't know about you, but when those moments happen for me, those moments of, oh, there's something really profound happening here. There's an oh wow that wells up from deep inside of me. How many people have experienced that? Yeah. Or if you haven't experienced it, can imagine that. So if you've experienced it or can imagine it, raise your hand. Okay, so everyone's hands went up except Vic's, but but we know he knows, right? Oh wow. So this picture is one you saw last week. It's a Silomar. And that's one of the places that I spent a little bit over a week on retreat. And I walked that beach. Different times of day in different light. Sometimes there was nobody there, and sometimes there were dogs and children and people playing. But there were repeated moments, those moments of feeling that presence and that power that is God in my life, and just knowing and experiencing that presence and knowing that I was one with that. So there were many oh wows that I experienced over those 8 days. And then sometimes the beach looks like this when the sun is setting. And this is actually Dillon Beach, which is much closer to us. And I stand there and I watch the sun going down. And our projectors really do not do justice to the beauty of that sunset. But it's amazing, and I feel the rhythm and the energy of the ocean, and I experience the horizon and that sun going down, and that same oh wow wells up inside of me. Or this is that same sunset a little while later, and again, it doesn't do it justice, but the whole sky was lit up orange with a blue background, and then the waves were coming in. And maybe beaches are not your oh wow. You know, maybe it's music or poetry or holding babies or gardening. We all have something that brings up that sense of knowing the divine presence. And for me, it's not just beaches. There's many different things that remind me, that turn the light on, if you will, and awaken me to that truth. I love here in California being able to go to forests that are, it doesn't even have to be the old redwoods, but just redwoods, and walking among such majestic trees. It's like, wow. I don't know what other word. It's just a wow that comes up from the very depth of my being. Or this was on that retreat in southern Washington State, and there were fields of tall grass with paths mowed so you could just walk and walk. And it was the last day, and I was taking a walk, and this deer was in the grass. And I stopped, and she wasn't afraid of me, and I wasn't afraid of her. And we stood there, and our eyes met, and we just looked at each other. And she was sweet enough to allow me to pull out my phone and to take this picture of her. And again, when I see this, it was that connection, that eye contact, and that same oh wow wells up. Isn't she pretty? I mean, isn't she really pretty? Oh, and this is a path near where I live. I walk every morning with Teddy there, and I don't know how many mornings I had walked, and this tree was always there, and it didn't have flowers on it. And one morning I came, and it was filled with these white and red flowers that looked like little feather tips, and it was windy that morning, so the whole tree was waving back and forth. And these two buds stood still enough, long enough for me to get this picture. Isn't that an oh wow? Yeah. And just the knowing that life is created in this way, and one day it's not there, and then it blossoms, it opens, and there's infinite possibilities contained in each one of those little seeds, right? Or this, you can't see that well on this projector, but it's a herd of cows walking over the hills. And the backdrop is Point Reyes. And again, there's wows, that sense of, this is more than words, folks. There is truly an infinite presence and power. There is really that which we call God or Spirit or the universe, and it fills every moment, every nook and cranny. God is just as present in those long tunnels that I sometimes drive through, and they look dark and dreary, as God is present among those cows that are walking over the hills. The difference is in me. I usually forget to awaken to God's presence in the tunnels. But in nature, or in some place that awakens my sense of that which is beautiful, I instantly experience that. I am so grateful to the people that put cameras on phones. No, I am really so grateful. It has changed my life experience because, we always carry our phones these days. And so that means I always carry my camera. And when I carry my camera, I look for those things that inspire me. I look for those moments that I'm filled with spirit and I want to take a picture. So what happens is I become more aware. And I will awaken many more times a day than I used to before I carried my camera on me at all times. Because it's a matter of remembering, it's a matter of awakening, and it's a matter of finding a practice that helps me remember. So I am so profoundly grateful to whoever came up with that idea. It has deepen my spiritual understanding in ways that I can't begin to describe. And this, again, the projector doesn't do it justice, is a picture of the clouds around the star constellation Pleiades. And I have to confess, I didn't take the pictures, so. But I liked it. The stars inspire me, and my camera won't take pictures of stars, so I borrow this one. But it's in a wow. Look that up online. It's really a beautiful picture. The clouds over Pleiades. Has everybody heard of Pleiades? It's a constellation in a different galaxy. If you own a Subaru, those 7 stars are the emblem on the Subarus. So if you don't know what it is, go look at someone's Subaru. Or it doesn't have to be nature. That's the skyline of Vancouver, British Columbia. There's a little island within the city. And my son and his family live on that island, so I go walking along, and that's the skyline. I mean, it's just like, wow, you know. The creativity that flows through people is the creativity, the creative power that is God, and we get things like this out of it. William Blake wrote a poem, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That's what he was writing about, the way these moments in physical time break through and allow us to see beyond the veil, allow us to know the God that is ever. Bottom line is, when we see and know God in this way, the only appropriate response that I can think of is, oh wow. And what else can you say other than maybe be speechless in awe, right? And to feel that oh wow within us. So this morning, I'd like everybody to think back to earlier this morning, to the first time you looked in a mirror. Close your eyes and think back to that moment. And I'd like you to remember what came up inside of you, what you felt, what words, what thoughts went through your mind. You don't have to share it, but how many people looked in the mirror and said, oh, wow. And that sense of the divine breaking through just overwhelmed you and inspired you. Raise your hands. Oh, come on. Don't we believe that we're one with God? How many people believe that we are one with God, that the divine shines through us? All right. So how many people looked in the mirror and said, oh, wow. We've got some work to do, folks. I've told this story before, but I know not everyone has heard it. So those that have heard it, please bear with me. But once upon a time, I had a bird. Actually, my son had a bird for about 3 weeks, and then he went to college. And then her name was Kona. That is actually a portrait of Kona. It's a photograph of an acrylic painting of Kona. My son painted that portrait. I have to tell a story on myself. It has nothing to do with this talk, and it's a total distraction, but I want to tell it anyway. So I was putting together the slides for this talk yesterday, and it was evening, and I was getting a little bit tired, but, it was getting toward the end, but I had a problem. My computer had crashed a few weeks before, and I lost many, many files, a lot of which I retrieved, but I could not find the slides that had the picture of Kona, because I've done this for another talk a while ago. And I looked and I looked through all my PowerPoint, and then I pulled out my flash drives where I had copies of my files, couldn't find the PowerPoint. And then I thought, well, I'll look in the picture file. Maybe I have the original pictures. And I went through the picture file, and I went through two or three backup floppy disks, and I'm not finding this picture of the photograph of Kona. And the whole time I knew I could go online and just clip a picture of a blue and gold macaw, but I wanted you to see the actual portrait that was painted. And so after a couple hours of this, I'm over there, well, I guess I just can't do it. And then it hit me that the portrait was hanging on my kitchen wall. Oh, wow. So I walked over with my little camera. That's why moments of inspiration are so precious, right? So anyway, the story behind that portrait is, well, before I even do that, I want, for those who haven't heard this, to know that this bird, Kona, is a blue and gold macaw, and research has shown that they have the equivalent IQ to a 3 or 4-year-old child. That's where they test. So what I was experiencing with her, because I didn't know about birds, she was teaching me. And I strongly got the sense that there were many times that when she spoke, she knew what she was saying. And then to have that borne out by research and the people who study them made me feel good, because it felt a little woo-woo to me, because I went into my experience with her thinking that she was like a parrot. She just said back to you what you said to her. One of the first times I realized she knew that there were many times that she knew what she was saying was Christmas time, and she was just starting to talk. She was a little, maybe 3 years old, a little bit older. And she was on her perch. She had a perch kind of like the height of those microphones. And the Nutcracker Suite was playing in the background. Does everyone know what the Okay. It's very melodic, and, and it's a happy music, and there are many tracks, and she was listening to them, and she was dancing to the music. She was stretching her wings and then the other way, and her head was high, and she was swaying to the music in perfect time, in perfect rhythm, and she looked so happy. One track ended, and the very next one was the battle scene. And that's the only piece that's not melodic and happy. And so this battle scene music started, and these clashing noises. She stopped dancing, and her head was kind of shaking, and she was looking around. And she finally stopped, and on top of her lungs yelled, "Stop it! I said stop it!" I had never taught her to say that. I mean, there were times when I said to her, "Stop it," but that combination and the timing, I'm like, oh. So I started paying attention to what she said. So the day that I got the gift of this portrait, it came wrapped in brown paper with the ribbon around it, and I was unwrapping it. The portrait is about this big. I was unwrapping it, and Kona was on a perch just behind me, and I could see her. And I unwrapped it and was holding this portrait of Kona, and I saw her reaction. Instantly, her eyes got big. She spread her wings. She bent down, and she said, "Oh, wow, hello, Kona." I felt in that moment like I had been punched in the stomach. My whole body reacted to that, because I knew instantly that if that had been a portrait of me, there is no way on earth I would have been able to say, oh, wow, hello, Dalia. I did not have that in me. I also knew in that instant that that was the heart of my spiritual journey for the rest of my life. To get to that place that my bird did so naturally, that knew so easily to say, oh, wow, in response to herself. I also knew, I was working as a psychologist then, that the people who were coming to see me in my private practice, it really didn't matter what issue they were coming with. It really didn't matter if there was a diagnosis or not. It really didn't matter what symptoms they were describing. I mean, all of those got tweaked in one way or another, but that the heart of the journey that I was supporting them in was the journey to know that they were an expression of the divine, and that the only appropriate response to each of them was, oh, wow. Oh, wow. I believe that that is at the heart of all of our journeys. Because just like God is ever present in the tunnels as well as at the sunsets, it's ours to develop a practice of awakening to it and knowing that presence, that power in all things. But most of all, to know that power and that presence that expresses through us in each and every moment. And if, oh wow, is the only appropriate response to the presence of God, then oh wow is the appropriate response to ourselves, right? And it is a journey, isn't it? It's a journey. Like I said, we have some work to do. So going forward, this is the goal in the morning. When you get up and you first see yourself, that your heart just opens up, your soul is just overflowing, and from deep within you, just like with Kona, comes an, oh wow, oh wow. For you are looking at the face of God in that moment. You are looking at the light of God shining through you. You are looking at the divine light. You are looking at the spark of God. Some people say it that way. But we have to be careful when we say a spark of God, because that implies we can take God and divide God up into little bits and everybody gets a little tiny bit of God. How many people are there? About 25 billion? 30 billion? So we get 1/30 of a billion of God? And no, that's God is not physical stuff that can get broken down. God is consciousness. God is intelligence. God is wisdom. God is light. God is love. God is infinite potential, and all of God is available to us. All of God is expressing through us. Our ability to know that God presence is what makes it feel small. You know, God is magnificently, infinitely, all present within us, always. And it is ours to awaken to that amazing truth. I can't read that, so I have to look this up. So as we're saying, oh wow, use two hands here. Yeah, okay. So one of the things is a tool for getting there to a practice. And it's what we say here at this service every Sunday. I am a beautiful child of God, perfect in every way. And what made me think that this might be a really good tool to use to get there is something that Adele taught me. Adele is about 6 years old now. When she was about 3, she came up for the first time and lit the Christ candle, 2 or 3. And I was so amazed by her confidence and her joy. And she stood there just beaming as we blessed her with this blessing. And she knew the words and she said the blessing back. And after the service, I went up to Adele and I said, Adele, you did such a great job lighting the Christ candle. And she looked up at me. She goes, I know. She has it, you know? She has it. I mean, how many of us are able to take in a compliment and look at someone and say, I know? Yeah? So the imp in me says to Adele, so do you want to do a talk sometime soon? Also, she got serious and she thought about it and looked up and said, yes. I talked to Mike, I shared this story, and he said, you know, every morning when she gets up and looks at the mirror, we say this together, and she learns to say this to herself as she's looking in the mirror. I am a beautiful child of God, perfect in every way. And she says it every morning as a practice, and it's become a part of how she knows Adele. So if it's worked for Adele, because it's hard to get up and say, okay, I'm going to generate an oh wow. Those oh wows come up spontaneously. But we can have a practice, and that's a beautiful affirmation. There are others. You know, I am the breath of God. God is breathing through me right now. I am an expression of the perfect life of God. God and I are one. Whatever affirmation would work for you to help you remember who you are. I recommend that as a practice. Because we look in the mirror anyway, we may as well turn it into something really beautiful. And then my thought is if we do this often enough, one morning we'll get up, look in the mirror, and say, oh, wow. Together? Oh, wow. Yeah. And from Rumi, you know how we talk about the metaphor of God as the ocean and we are a drop in the ocean, one with God. But what Rumi has to say about that is you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. As Rumi knew that we don't divide up God, that the allness of God expresses through us, even as we are just that one drop. Right? Namaste. I behold the divine in each and every one of you.